Hey guys! In this video, we slip quietly into the candlelit corridors of 18th century Europe, where a teenage girl with a sharp mind and even sharper cheekbones is about to change the fate of a continent. Picture a gusty Baltic wind whispering through the silk drapes of a drafty Prussian manor, while an ambitious mother whispers even harder into her daughter's ear. Marry well or end up in a convent with Aunt Helga. You probably won't survive this story with your view of royal fairy tales intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts, as most royal stories do, with a name swap. Born Sophia Augusta Frederica in the small, not-so-charming city of Stettin, Prussia, now Siecien, Poland, our future empress is far from glittering courts and crown jewels. She's the daughter of a minor prince with a tight budget and a mother who sees the world like one giant chessboard, and her daughter as the Queen Peace. Johanna Elizabeth of Holstein-Gottorp, Sophia's mother, is no wallflower. She's got royal blood, a Rolodex of powerful cousins, and a drive that could steamroll mountains. She drags young Sophia from one noble household to the next, like a social climbing tour guide, all to score her daughter a title, and maybe a throne. "Look," she'd whisper during awkward family visits, "that's your cousin. She didn't marry. She has a cat and lives in a freezing turret. Is that what you want?" Sophia takes the hint. The girl learns to smile strategically, to downplay her intellect, and to flirt with theology just enough to impress without actually having to quote scripture. It's like the 18th century version of curating your Instagram to attract a billionaire. And then, bingo, a letter arrives from Russia. Empress Elizabeth, daughter of Peter the Great and professional matchmaker-in-chief, is looking for a bride for her nephew and heir, Peter Ulrich. It's not exactly an invitation to prom. It's more like being invited to an audition for a role in a dynasty. The Empress has been watching Sophia for a while. Letters, portraits, palace gossip. Elizabeth knows everything except Sophia's favorite color. Probably black, considering the stakes. And let's talk about Peter Ulrich for a second. He's technically royalty, but with the charisma of a boiled potato and the health record of a Victorian chimney sweep. He's been booted from the Swedish throne, but landed the Russian one, thanks to family ties thicker than borscht. He hates Russia, prefers German, and collects toy soldiers like he's 12. Spoiler alert, he's not the dreamboat Sophia was hoping for. Still, Johanna smells power like a bloodhound and rushes her daughter to Russia, traveling under fake names like they're in a historical spy movie. Sophia arrives in the snow-covered empire to cannon fire and curious stares. And for the first time in her life, people actually bow. It's here, in the icy glow of St. Petersburg, that Sophia begins to bloom. She studies the Russian language, customs, and culture like it's an Olympic sport. She converts to Orthodox Christianity. Goodbye, Protestant prayers. Hello, golden icons, and takes a new name, Ekaterina Alexeyevna, or as we'll eventually know her, Catherine. The transformation isn't just cosmetic. She's digging into Enlightenment philosophy, Montesquieu, Voltaire, the intellectual heavyweights of the day, while her fiancé is playing dress-up and trying to get out of church. Catherine, meanwhile, is sketching a mental blueprint of the throne room and wondering what she'd change if she ever got the keys. Historians still argue whether Catherine had her sights on the crown from day one, or if it was Peter's flaming incompetence that nudged her toward destiny. Either way, she plays the long game. By 1745, she's 15, fluent in Russian and fluent in royal survival. That summer, she marries Peter in a ceremony that feels more like a business merger than a wedding. The guests cheer. Catherine curtsies. Peter fiddles with a toy cannon and wonders when the buffet starts. Their honeymoon is, well, let's just say it involves more awkward silences than romantic sunsets. Catherine quickly discovers her husband's hobbies include drunken role-play, dissing Russia, and not loving his wife. He tells her flat out he's in love with someone else. Bold move, Pete. Bolder still when your new wife is smarter, more ambitious, and more popular than you. Still, Catherine plays nice. Outwardly, she's the dutiful wife. Privately, she's reading, planning, and not so subtly realizing she might be better suited for the job of ruling than her doughy-featured husband. Catherine is now Grand Duchess, wife to the heir of the Russian Empire. But let's not cue the romantic music just yet. Her marriage to Peter III isn't so much happily ever after as it is awkward roommate arrangement with crowns. Picture living with someone who collects toy soldiers, drinks like it's a sport, and considers bathing optional. Peter isn't just eccentric. He's proudly incompetent. He sulks in German, plays the violin badly, and seems entirely uninterested in Russia, its people, or, well, his wife. She channels her disappointment into study, poring over philosophy, law, and languages. She reads Voltaire, Montesquieu, and Beccaria, absorbing Enlightenment ideals like a sponge in a vodka spill. And while Peter is busy parading around, dressed like a Prussian soldier, Catherine is quietly building relationships within the court. Maids, guards, advisors, anyone worth knowing, she gets to know. She's not networking, she's net weaving. The ancient Roman emperors had their Praetorian guards. Catherine? She's got brunch plans with their great-great-grandsons. Now let's talk about Catherine's extracurricular reading. And no, we're not referring to steamy romance novels. Her real passion? Strategy. She begins to see herself not as a foreign wife, but as a future ruler, one who could lead Russia into the Enlightenment. Still, that vision is years away. For now, she has to deal with a court ruled by Empress Elizabeth, a husband who's about as emotionally available as a tax audit, and a country teetering between progress and stubborn tradition. By the 1750s, Catherine and Peter are more like diplomatic props than a couple. Their marriage has more frost than a Siberian window pane. Meanwhile, Peter contracts smallpox, which frankly does his face no favors. Even Catherine, no stranger to tact, is visibly horrified the first time she sees his post-illness complexion. She politely avoids screaming. Yet smallpox does have one unintended benefit. It spurs Empress Elizabeth to demand an heir. Catherine, already under immense pressure, finally delivers a son, Paul, in 1754. Hooray! Well, sort of. Court whispers buzz like a beehive on espresso. Is Paul really Peter's son? They ask. Catherine had indeed taken lovers. Grigory Orlov, among the earliest. But Paul's resemblance to Peter, especially in temperament and fashion choices, suggests that genetics might have done their job after all. Historians still argue whether Paul was truly Peter's or not, but one thing is clear: he wasn't Catherine's ticket to domestic bliss. And speaking of Empress Elizabeth, she doesn't just steal the spotlight, she steals the baby. Paul is raised under her strict supervision, leaving Catherine isolated once again. Her role as mother is ceremonial at best, but rather than wallow, she pivots. Catherine uses the distance from her son as freedom to plot her course. If she couldn't be a mother in the traditional sense, she would mother a nation. In 1761, the game board finally shifts. Empress Elizabeth dies, and Peter ascends the throne as Emperor Peter III. The court braces for a reign of oddball policies and toy soldier parades, and they are not disappointed. Peter's 6-month reign is a masterclass in how not to be Tsar. He pulls Russia out of the 7 Years' War just as they're about to win, siding instead with Prussia, because of course he loves Frederick the Great. This isn't just core diplomacy. It's like quitting a video game just as you're about to beat the boss. Peter also antagonizes the powerful Orthodox Church. He confiscates church lands, demands beardless clergy, and gives off strong "I Googled this last night" energy when discussing theology. He manages to offend nobles, priests, and peasants alike, all before breakfast. And his attitude toward Catherine? Let's say it didn't improve. He openly mocks her, threatens to send her to a convent, and makes it very clear she's no longer welcome in the spotlight. Which is ironic, considering she was the only one who understood what a spotlight was for. But Catherine is not about to let herself become a footnote in Peter's farce. She knows she's in danger, not just politically, but physically. The stakes have shifted from exile to survival, so she begins to move. With the help of her lover, the dashing and well-connected Grigory Orlov, she starts reaching out to military leaders, senators, and the ever-fickle guard regiments in St. Petersburg. It's less of a conspiracy and more of a group project where Catherine does all the work. Orlov is more than just a pretty face with a saber. He has influence where it counts, the barracks. Together, they start winning hearts, minds, and muskets. Bribes are exchanged, oaths whispered. Catherine doesn't scream revolution. She hums it softly into the ears of the right men. The groundwork for the coup is set. All it needs now is one little mistake from Peter to tip the whole tower. Cue the soldier who panics at the wrong time. One night in late June 1762, a nervous guard mutters something about the plot being discovered. He's promptly arrested, and the conspirators realize the clock has officially started. If they wait, they risk everything. If they act tonight, they might just win it all. So Catherine's team springs into action. Orlov's brother is dispatched to Peterhof, where Catherine has been essentially sidelined. He hires the fastest carriage money can buy and races through the night, risking everything to get her back to the capital before the morning light. By dawn, Catherine is out of her silk gown, into riding boots, and thundering toward St. Petersburg. The empire, quite literally, is waking up. And Peter? Well, he's somewhere playing the violin, blissfully unaware that his crown is about to be airlifted out from under his powdered wig. No more shadowy libraries, no more forced smiles at court. This is a coup in daylight, and she's driving it with the precision of a woman who's had it up to here with her husband's violin recitals. Back in St. Petersburg, the guards' barracks are already stirring. These aren't just soldiers, they're influencers with bayonets. Catherine arrives still wearing pieces of borrowed uniform, her own clothes hastily tossed aside like yesterday's court gossip. One by one, she visits each regiment, her presence igniting cheers like she's the headliner at an imperial rock concert. The guards, long tired of Peter's oddities and growing disdain for Russia, line up to pledge allegiance. There are no speeches, just a feeling. This is the one. This is our Empress. Peter, meanwhile, is orchestrating a parade of Holstein soldiers in Oranienbaum. It's his idea of bonding, though it feels more like a medieval corporate retreat. When a breathless messenger stumbles in with news of the unrest in the capital, Peter shrugs, literally. He waves the messenger off like someone asking him to try a new vegetable. "I'll read it later," he says. He never does. Procrastination, now in royal flavor. At the same time, Catherine isn't just collecting loyalty, she's brandishing it. Clad in emerald green, the uniform of the Preobrazhensky Guards, she strides into the Cathedral of Our Lady Kazan, the arches echoing with bootsteps and anticipation. The Archbishop of Novgorod declares her sovereign ruler of Russia. The Senate, the clergy, the army, all nod in agreement. Historians still argue whether this was a bloodless revolution or the world's most fabulous costume change. But it worked. Outside, the crowd roars. A nobleman nervously dispatched by Peter begs Catherine not to oppose her husband. She gently leads him to the balcony and waves to the mass of cheering soldiers and citizens. "Deliver your message to them," she says, smiling sweetly, with just enough sass to suggest she's been waiting to use that line for years. Back at Peterhof, Peter continues his afternoon with all the urgency of a man rearranging his stamp collection during a house fire. His advisors, growing increasingly panicked, offer plans: ride to the capital, rally loyalists, flee to Germany. He chooses none. Instead, he sends half-hearted orders to secure a random island fortress, which sounds more like vacation planning than military strategy. Catherine, on the other hand, is channeling her inner general. She borrows the rank of a colonel and marches with her troops. One young officer even hands her his sword knot, completing her outfit like it's the final accessory in a fashion-forward uprising. She doesn't just look like a leader, she is one. Peter finally gets a clue when a group of well-meaning sailors show up with fireworks for his canceled party and mention, "Oh, by the way, everyone in the capital's calling your wife Your Majesty now." Enraged, he orders his Holstein troops toward St. Petersburg. The catch? No one told them to bring real weapons. They arrive ready for battle with ceremonial parade rifles and confused expressions. It's like sending a jazz band to a sword fight. And then Peter folds, just collapses like a souffle in a thunderstorm. He dismisses his staff, holes up in his room, and writes a pitiful letter to Catherine, offering to share the throne. The energy? Less co-monarch, and more, "I'll do the dishes for a month if you don't ground me." Catherine isn't moved. The next day, Peter tries again, this time offering to abdicate if he can just return to Holstein. Catherine agrees. His abdication letter is an unintentional comedy, full of apologies, admissions of incompetence, and the literary equivalent of a white flag. He signs it on July 9th, 1762, after 6 months as emperor. The court breathes a collective sigh of relief, followed by a collective intake of breath, because within days, Peter is dead. The official report says hemorrhoidal colic, which historians agree is less a medical diagnosis and more a creative writing prompt. It's almost certainly an assassination, masked as a drunken brawl, likely orchestrated by Alexei Orlov, Grigory's brother. Whether Catherine ordered it or just gave a subtle nod while sipping tea remains a mystery. Historians still debate the extent of her involvement, but let's be real. She didn't exactly lose sleep over it. Frederick the Great of Prussia, never one to miss a roast, famously quipped that Peter allowed himself to be dethroned like a child sent to bed. And Catherine? She pardons the killers, not necessarily because she condones it, but because it closes the chapter permanently. With Peter gone, Catherine wastes no time proving she isn't just a placeholder in a pretty dress. She reverses nearly all of his ridiculous policies, starting with calling home Russian troops poised to fight Denmark. The army, thrilled to avoid a senseless war over Peter's ancestral hobbyland, basically throws her a parade. Then comes the delicate matter of the church. Peter had started to confiscate church property, which made him public enemy number 1 among the clergy. Catherine? She finishes the job, but smartly. She frames it as economic necessity and folds the church into the machinery of the state. Over 1 million church-owned serfs are now under her taxation, and clergy become salaried employees. The Pope probably wasn't on board, but the imperial treasury sure was. Through it all, Catherine shows she can outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast every man in the room. The ancient Spartans used to throw sickly babies off cliffs. Catherine? She overthrows empires in a corset and heels, and all without firing a shot. Catherine may have taken the throne without shedding a drop of blood, but now comes the hard part, keeping it. And that means ruling with the grace of a philosopher queen and the spine of a general. Fortunately, she has both, and a bookshelf that could crush a horse. As she slides into power, Catherine makes her intentions clear. She's not here to be a placeholder or a puppet. She's here to rebuild Russia. And step 1, shake the dust off its laws. Catherine dives into Enlightenment thinking like it's the next season of a prestige drama. Montesquieu, Beccaria, Locke. If they had a hot take on justice, she was reading it. Her vision is no light daydream scribbled on a napkin. It becomes the nakaz, a sprawling, ambitious document meant to guide the rewriting of Russian law. The nakaz is bold, revolutionary even. It denounces torture, promotes equality under the law, in theory, and calls for clear and humane legal codes. Imagine Voltaire writing a how to govern Pinterest board. That's Catherine, except she's wearing a crown and thinking 10 moves ahead. She summons a legislative commission, a kind of mega focus group with nobles, peasants, Cossacks, and every flavor of Russian society, short of bears in Yushchenkas. In theory, it's a grand Enlightenment experiment. In practice, it's more like a really chaotic Reddit thread. Delegates get bogged down in local complaints, unrelated feuds, and an overwhelming sense that most of them haven't done the reading. Catherine grows frustrated. It's like herding cats. She probably doesn't say, but totally thinks. Historians still argue whether the nakaz was a genuine attempt at reform or just a PR move. The commission ultimately fizzles out by 1768, when war and political distractions hijack the imperial calendar. Still, the nakaz boosts Catherine's global image. France swoons. Enlightenment thinkers toast her from their salons. She's the girl boss of autocracy. But theory and practice rarely dance in step, especially when war enters the chat. While Catherine is busy turning Russia's legal system into a less nightmarish maze, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth decides it's a great time to combust. It's weak, divided, and conveniently located. Catherine sees an opportunity, not just for land, but for legacy. Using a mix of military pressure and romantic history, she once had a fling with Stanislaw Poniatowski, the man she installs as Polish king. Talk about mixing business with pleasure. She turns Poland into a Russian satellite. But propping up a puppet king proves expensive, and the locals aren't exactly thrilled about Russian interference. Rebellions bubble. Troops are deployed. Diplomacy turns into chess with bayonets. Catherine's solution: cut up the pie. She joins Austria and Prussia in the first of 3 partitions of Poland. It's geopolitically efficient, morally questionable, and totally on brand for 18th century realpolitik. One could say the Enlightenment ideals got temporarily misplaced. The ancient Babylonians used cuneiform. Catherine? She used red ink on maps and a firm "mine now" attitude. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire is also feeling spicy. Russian expansion in the Black Sea pokes the bear, well, the crescent, and war erupts. But Catherine doesn't flinch. She's already got a secret weapon: Grigory Potemkin. He's brilliant, theatrical, possibly her secret husband. No marriage certificate survives, but her letters are basically love poems with government memos sprinkled in. Potemkin isn't just a pretty face with military medals. He's bold, ambitious, and maybe the only man Catherine ever considered her equal. While others play at court intrigue, he redraws borders with ink and blood. Under Potemkin's guidance, Russia wins the war. The Treaty of Kuchik-Kainarka in 1774 grants Russia access to the Black Sea and influence over Orthodox Christians in Ottoman territory. More importantly, it hands Catherine a glowing neon sign that says "Empire Builder." The independence of Crimea is technically preserved, but let's be honest, it's about as independent as a toddler with an iPad and a bedtime. By 1783, Catherine makes her move and formally annexes the Crimean Khanate. It's a masterstroke, strategic, profitable, and a PR coup. Russian ships now sail freely into the Black Sea, and Catherine's image as a military empress hardens. She and Potemkin plan grand cities, fortified ports, and staged managed tours to impress foreign ambassadors, giving rise to the legend of Potemkin villages. Though historians still argue whether that's a real thing or just diplomatic fan fiction. And while Catherine carves out new coastlines, she's also crafting a cultural empire. She's building more than armies. She's building Russia's image. Palaces rise, art flows in, and the Hermitage becomes one of Europe's grandest collections. Think Louvre meets Netflix, curated, commanding, and designed to impress. But behind the glam, cracks remain. Chief among them, serfdom. While Catherine flirts with Enlightenment theory on liberty and rights, most of her people remain literal property. Serfs are tied to the land, sold like furniture, beaten with impunity, and taxed within an inch of their lives. It's state-sponsored feudalism, and it's not cute. Catherine knows this. Early in her reign, she toys with reform. But after the legislative failures and mounting noble resistance, she quietly shelves those ambitions. The Enlightenment might have ideas, but the Russian nobility has pitchforks, and the memory of Pugachev's rebellion still lurks like a fever dream. So Catherine plays a balancing act, art for the salons, serfdom for the fields. A public image of progress, painted over deeply conservative policies. It's not hypocrisy exactly, more like autocratic multitasking. And then there's the church. Remember Peter's ham-fisted attempts to seize church land? Catherine finishes the job, but with elegance. She nationalizes religious property, turns priests into state employees, and redirects wealth to the crown. All without triggering a full-scale schism. The Orthodox Church is humbled, taxed, and effectively folded into the bureaucracy. The miracle isn't that she did it, but that she got away with it. Russia, once a sprawling collection of fiefdoms and folklore, is transforming. It's an empire now, modernizing, militarizing, and taking its place on the European stage. Catherine isn't just writing history, she's driving the sleigh, bells jingling, empire expanding. And yet, beneath the velvet, the crown, the oil portraits, she knows her throne rests on a sea of contradictions. But for now, the ships sail, the banners wave, and the maps keep changing. As the 1780s melt into the 1790s, Catherine's empire gleams from afar like a polished Fabergé egg. But up close, cracks are forming. The Enlightenment ideas that once lit up her court now flicker in the shadow of unrest, revolution, and one terrifying question whispered across Europe. What if the people don't want a queen anymore? It starts far away, in France. The guillotine finds its rhythm. Monarchs start losing their heads, literally. And Enlightenment ideals sharpen into guillotine blades. Catherine watches this bloody remix of her favorite philosophers with growing horror. She had quoted Voltaire. They beheaded Voltaire's friends. Not exactly the kind of inspired by she had in mind. So she tightens her grip. Censorship increases. Private printing presses are banned. Books by Enlightenment thinkers, some she used to correspond with, are suddenly removed from circulation. It's a full pivot from philosopher queen to slightly paranoid aunt who won't let you read The Catcher in the Rye. Historians still argue whether Catherine was scared by the French Revolution's violence or simply seized the opportunity to squash potential rebellion. Either way, the ink of idealism begins to dry. But if political philosophy is faltering, Catherine's logistical genius is still firing on all cylinders. She remains laser-focused on holding her empire together, even if that means sacrificing a few ideals on the altar of stability. And nowhere is this balancing act clearer than in her response to one of Russia's most dangerous uprisings, the Pugachev Rebellion. Enter Yemelyan Pugachev, a charismatic Cossack with a remarkable resemblance to Peter III, or so he claims. In a plot twist that even Netflix would call a bit much, Pugachev declares he is the real Peter, back from the dead to free the serfs, restore tradition, and maybe hand out some goats. It sounds absurd until it works. Thousands rally to his cause. Serfs, peasants, soldiers, tired of cruelty and taxes, and landlords who think pitchforks are decorative, rise up. They burn estates, execute nobles, and threaten to overturn the empire. For nearly a year, vast regions of Russia fall under Pugachev's rule. The dream of liberation spreads like wildfire, or at least like an angry mob with torches and a suspiciously confident Peter III. At first, Catherine's government dismisses it as a rural tantrum. But as the rebellion grows, so does her concern. Her Enlightenment rhetoric about easing the burden on serfs now feels like a smoking powder keg. She needs troops, and fast. Fortunately, the war with the Ottomans is winding down, and soldiers are returning. They arrive well-fed, well-armed, and entirely done with rebels pretending to be emperors. By early 1774, the tide turns. Pugachev's forces crumble under military pressure and betrayal. He is captured, by his own men no less, and delivered to Moscow in a cage. His public execution on January 10th, 1775, is a grisly spectacle meant to end the fairy tale for good. Catherine breathes easier, but the rebellion leaves a mark deeper than any battle scar. The fantasy of freeing the serfs, already fraying, now evaporates. Catherine may have dreamed of modernizing Russia's social structure, but after facing the raw fury of those same serfs, she pulls back hard. The nobility is nervous. The empire is fragile. Reform is postponed indefinitely. Instead, she rewards loyalty. The Charter of the Nobility becomes law in 1785, enshrining aristocratic rights in a glittering legal frame. Nobles can no longer be punished without trial. They gain full ownership of their estates. Serfs, still not invited to the party. Catherine doesn't see this as cruelty. It's strategy. Stability requires hierarchy, and Russia's ruling class, for better or worse, are the bones holding up her imperial body. And after the Pugachev scare, Catherine isn't risking a broken spine. Still, she doesn't abandon progress entirely. Where she can move forward safely, she does. One surprising battlefield? Public health. Smallpox, yes, the real deal, is still wreaking havoc across Europe. And Catherine? She decides to do something revolutionary. Get vaccinated. It's 1768. The vaccine is new, controversial, and generally regarded with the same enthusiasm as week-old cabbage. But Catherine believes in science. She invites Dr. Thomas Dimsdale, a British physician, to inoculate her in private. If it fails, well, let's not even go there. It doesn't. She survives, thrives, and then announces it to everyone, like a queen dropping a selfie in her hospital gown. Nobles follow suit. Soon, entire provinces are lining up for the jab. Catherine doesn't just rule Russia, she vaccinates it. And yet, for all her public victories, her private life continues to be a mosaic of heartbreak, loyalty, and increasingly awkward family dinners. Let's talk about her son, Paul. From the moment Paul is born, he's raised away from Catherine, first under Empress Elizabeth, then by others, until Catherine eventually takes over, but not exactly with maternal warmth. She sees in Paul a threat, not a partner. He's volatile, dramatic, and worst of all, he idolizes his father, Peter III. Yep, that Peter, the one Catherine overthrew. Parenting, folks, never as easy as the textbooks promise. Paul isn't just annoying, he's politically dangerous. He criticizes his mother, mimics his father's mannerisms, and alienates her advisors. Catherine, ever the tactician, sidelines him from government. She denies him access to real power. Worse, she raises his children herself, possibly preparing to skip Paul entirely in the line of succession. Rumors swirl like Russian snow. Will Catherine disinherit her own son in favor of her grandson? She never confirms it. Historians still debate whether she truly intended to cut Paul out or whether fate simply ran out of time. As the 1790s creep forward, Catherine's health begins to decline. Her dazzling reign, full of palaces, portraits, and proclamations, begins to slow. But her legacy is still very much in progress. She remains surrounded by advisors, art, and culture. And the sound of shuffling court slippers. Russia, now a true European power, stretches from the Baltic to the Black Sea, from Warsaw to Siberia. It is richer, stronger, and undeniably more modern than the kingdom she inherited. But the contradictions still linger. She fought for education, but denied it to millions. She abolished torture, but left serfdom untouched. She embraced enlightenment until revolution threatened her crown. Catherine's Russia is not a utopia, but it is hers, built brick by brick, idea by idea, and soldier by soldier. She didn't just rule an empire, she crafted it. November 17th, 1796. The day begins like any other in the glittering world of Imperial Russia. But before the evening candles are even lit, the palace is hushed. Servants whisper behind doorways, and the great heartbeat of the empire falters. Catherine the Great, empress, conqueror, builder, reformer, and occasional matchmaker, is dead. The official report? A stroke. She collapses in her private chambers and slips into a coma, never regaining consciousness. By evening, the woman who held the world's largest empire together for 34 years is gone. The candle that had burned brilliantly, if at times unevenly, finally flickers out. No horses were involved, for the record. That particularly grotesque myth, the one claiming Catherine died in an intimate encounter with a stallion, was fabricated long after her death. A cruel punchline by enemies who couldn't compete with her legacy. Misogyny wears many hats. This one happened to have a saddle. Paul, her estranged son, finally takes the throne. And like a teen taking over his mom's Facebook account, he immediately changes the password. He reverses many of Catherine's policies, not out of reasoned disagreement, but spite. He loosens restrictions on the church, tightens control over the military and introduces new court rituals so elaborate, even peacocks feel underdressed. He also reinstates corporal punishment for soldiers and cracks down on the nobility. Unsurprisingly, this wins him few friends and earns him a swift assassination just 5 years later. It's said that in Russia, autocracy is often tempered by assassination. Paul is living proof, or rather, dying proof. And Catherine? She's already immortal. Her reign is remembered as the golden age of the Russian Empire. Under her rule, Russia expands its territory by over 200,000 square miles. She strengthens the economy, builds schools, and modernizes the army. She fosters art, music, architecture, and establishes the Hermitage Museum, now home to one of the finest art collections in the world. Catherine turns Russia from an Eastern mystery into a Western power. She plays the game of European politics like chess, always 3 moves ahead, wearing a crown that doubles as a thinking cap. Yet she remains an enigma, a foreigner who becomes Russia's most Russian ruler, a woman who writes about freedom while expanding serfdom, a ruler who champions reason but survives by calculation. Her contradictions aren't footnotes, they're the melody of her rule. The Enlightenment gave her tools, and she used them, but only as far as they didn't threaten the foundation beneath her gilded throne. She flirted with progress, danced with philosophy, and waltzed through wars. And through it all, she held the center, cool, commanding, and impossibly complex. Even her critics couldn't ignore her. Voltaire called her the Semiramis of the North, a nod to the ancient warrior queen. Others called her manipulative, power-hungry, a usurper. But no one ever called her forgettable. And that's the thing about Catherine. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss out on more wild history tales. Catch you later.